Now I'd like to welcome Roy A. Hunt Foundation Fellow Alexa Riggs.
My name is Alexa. As you've heard, I graduated in May with degrees in Interdisciplinary Science, Psychology, and a minor in Gender Studies. And the Gender Studies minor, even though it was only, I think, 6 credits to kind of complete this, it really is foundational in the way that I think about interdisciplinary science and psychology. And one example of that is a queer collective organization that I co-founded with another student, which was directly in response to the National Health Assessment Survey conducted on our campus every 2 years. And this survey showed that LGBTQI students at the new school suffer just kind of across every marker. So there's more incidences of sexual assault, recreational drug and alcohol abuse, suicidal ideation, kind of any major health outcome, they're lower on the scale. So me and someone else founded this organization to kind of respond to that need. But I'm going to talk about my experience at the Clinical Directors Network, which is a nonprofit organization that looks to improve clinical practice and clinical, just any kind of association with being a provider and then working out into the community. They want to improve that. And health inequity is a huge and major problem, and this is just one very small directed way to target that problem. And they do a lot of it through clinical education. And something that attracted me specifically to CDN was their focus on cultural competency and making sure that these clinicians are going to improve and better equip themselves with how to approach patients from, a variety of backgrounds. And I was an e-learning intern for the spring and summer. And under this umbrella, I did a lot of different things. We did some online things, hosted websites and webcast videos, emails, flyers, lots of things under that umbrella, but I'm going to talk about one project that I had a lot of, relationship with, and it became known around the office as the Russian CRC Project. And the Russian CRC Project stands for the Russian Colorectal Cancer Screening Project, which is all about improving screening rates. And CDN did this in collaboration with New York City DOH. And this map, I think, is a really good example of why this project is necessary. This is really health inequity visualized, and I'm going to try and get my mouse up here, but if not, okay, there it is. So this lightest shade right here is the most amount of people that get colonoscopy screenings. So you'll see in Manhattan that there's a lot of people who are getting colonoscopies. And then in the yellowish color, these are the next percentages that do not get them. And finally, this darkest shade of orange around in the outer boroughs, Brooklyn, the Bronx, they're not getting screenings at a much higher percentage. And I have to really stress that this is not a coincidence, and I know I'm a little bit preaching to the choir here, but this is distributive justice in the very opposite way. We have resources that are not being evenly spread out among our community, and this project is really about responding to that need. And so in response to that, we did a literature review to just see what was out there. And I had the privilege of conducting that first step into the literature. And I was looking for things in English and in Russian to really see just anything. What is there out there about CRC and Russian-speaking communities? And I found a lot of things in Russian and a lot of things in English, and from that information we developed a website for clinicians and for patients to really understand Russian-speaking community members and their interactions with colorectal cancer screening. And so these are just examples of some of the things that I helped identify that are in Russian that went up on the website. And again, the website is kind of elaborate because there's clinician resources that are in English and Russian, and then there's patient resources in English and in Russian. So from this literature review and from this website, we also developed something called a Continuing Medical Education Unit. And a CME for short is something that clinicians need to stay licensed. And so they complete these little units of education to keep up to speed on what's going on, in a variety of things. And so we wanted to do one on Russian colorectal cancer screening and, teach them how to really approach Russian-speaking community members. What is going on? Why are there low screening rates with Russian-speaking community members? So that was a PowerPoint that was developed from the website and the literature review that took a lot of time. I think it's 30, 40, 50 slides, and they were translated in Russian and in English many times back and forth, because the presenter for this, who conducted it live, did it in English and then did it in Russian. And that'll be a theme that I will continue to talk about, English and in Russian. So this is our title slide, the slide I just showed you. And then the third one that I want to bring your attention to is a slide that we were trying to really get clinicians in the room to think about the patients and to disrupt this power hierarchy a little bit between I'm the clinician and I have knowledge and you need to listen to me, and get them to thinking about what does your patient want. So it says some Russian-speaking patients are more comfortable with Russian-speaking providers, others are not. Ask your patient what they prefer. And I think that's really telling to what this organization is about. So after we did this CME credit, there's a survey afterwards. This survey also required design, and we have to get people to watch the video and then to complete the survey. And in the survey, it's more needs assessment. And Stephen just talked really eloquently about all the data. The survey collected a lot of data. But in order to get all that data, we had to do a lot of outreach. So I think I mailed 400 people that are clinicians that speak Russians. We had other people going out into Sheepshead Bay and Coney Island, going door to door to the clinicians. I called people, emails again, and then I think this is the best example of our outreach for reaching clinicians that serve Russian-speaking people, which was a Russian-American Foundation Health and Sports Fair. So in Sheepshead Bay, there was of Russian cultural activities and lots of things going on, and CDN and I tabled for 8 hours and tried to get healthcare workers who were at this festival to come over, take our survey. Are you a healthcare provider? You know, we want to talk to you about colorectal cancer screening. And in this survey, we were really trying to find out what's going on. Why are these screening rates low? What can we do to improve them? And so after we collected all those, I was part of the data analysis that we were going to present to a conference in New York City a little in the future. And this is one of the slides that I worked on in the presentation, and I remember it very specifically because at first it came out backwards. I don't know if my boss in the audience remembers, but it was very stressful because we were on the phone with the state and we had to be like, it's backwards, it's backwards. So the cost is all the way on the right, I think. I know it's hard to tell, but this is identified as a major barrier according to clinicians. And then all the way on this side, another of the largest major barriers is fear of cancer. So these are kind of intuitive things that I see you looking at it. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the third one, which is patient embarrassment or anxiety about screening.
Yeah, so this was another thing that we identified in the literature that a lot of Russian-speaking community members just don't want to talk about it. There's a fear and that there's an embarrassment that, like, I just don't want to go there. I don't want any part of that. And so that's another theme that we saw. So this was presented at the conference that I also attended and had a small part in also getting to present to that, which I thought was very rewarding. In that conference, we also identified other groups doing really lovely things with colorectal cancer screening, which was, I think one group was doing patient navigation actually through the church and African American males over the age of 50. There's lots of things going on. So in summary, I started with a literature review. We built a website for patients and clinicians in English and in Russian. Then we did this continuing medical education unit in English and in Russian. It's available. You can get this PowerPoint just as themselves, or there's a video with the lecture, and then the survey that accompanies that. And then we went to the conference and presented the data analysis with another PowerPoint that also had to be built from scratch. From these things, specifically from the conference, I got a job offer during my presentation that was, again, very brief, but obviously still made an impact. I got a job offer from CDN at my internship, and then I think the work that I did through the clinical outreach really got me to where I am today, which is at Beth Israel doing patient recruitment, which I wouldn't have gotten without faculty connections at the new school. So it really all came together. And of course, thank you everyone for coming out and putting this together. You know, the new school, of course, CDN, and the Hunt Foundation, which I wouldn't be able to do it, and my mentors, which really keep me focused, to say the least.
Thank you, Alexa. Who has questions for Alexa?
I have a question, but I have an insider view as well.
Okay.
So both you and Stephen took Ilir's epidemiology course, and I know that some of the things that you learned in that class might have challenged this experience, and I was wondering if you could talk about negotiating that space where you know one thing, you're doing something else, something like, I think Ceci was saying, like, I want to do this work, but how do I pull away and be in the work and be present?
Yeah, you really do have an insider view, because in the Intro to Epidemiology class, we talk a lot about whether or not these things are cost effective. Should we really be asking people to get colonoscopies? And this is a conversation I was lucky enough to have in the office on more than one occasion. Like, we're doing this whole project, is this really what we think is valuable? And I have to say that I think at the end of it, I feel like I support the mission of colorectal cancer screening because the cancer is 100% preventable, allegedly, with this screening. So I think that negotiating it was hard, but I was lucky enough to be able to talk it through, not just with my peers and not just in a classroom setting, but also with the people I was doing the work with. So talking, I guess.
Kind of approaching this a little bit differently, but not through the epidemiology class, but through an international health class. Last week, our professor kind of threw a wrench into all of the conceptions that I had leaving the internship. So she was talking about evidence and what counts as evidence. And sometimes the evidence really leads to more disparity, because if you're looking at diseases that, have a lot of money in them, a lot of people care about them. A lot of people, there's a huge disease burden. But what about the diseases where you might be more neglected? And so this was really kind of forced me to think about it in a more critical way. So that's what I mean when I say, we have a lot of data, but what does it mean in context, and what does it mean outside of the context? Does that kind of make sense?
So I'm getting a colonoscopy Friday, and my question is, I dread getting a colonoscopy because the preparation is horrible, not the colonoscopy is nothing. So did that come up where people said, I've been told it's horrible, the preparation is horrible, so I just as soon not do it? Yeah,
that came up a lot. People don't want to get colonoscopies, especially Russian-speaking community members, yeah, definitely that was one of the barriers identified, not one of the largest ones, but it was definitely present.
And I don't have too much experience clinically with this field, so thank you, Alexa. Yeah.
At the conference I was at, they were presenting data about how to improve the actual practice of colonoscopies, and one group did a study about clinical time looking at the video that I guess goes on with it, and the longer your video, the better a chance that the reading is actually accurate. So just, make sure that clinician is on top of it.
They put you to sleep now.
Oh, so you don't even have a chance.
Right. The first time I went, they did what you said. You could watch them do it.
Right.
But now so I think that's just a tick on the mind.
Yeah.
Why the Russian immigrant population? We saw the geographic disparities shown. Was it also connected into?
Yes, it was also connected to Russian-speaking population specifically. I wanted to show this to give it a broader context that colonoscopy screenings in general is not evenly distributed, but Russian-speaking community members have the absolute lowest rates. And so in recent years, other minority populations have kind of leveled off with each other, not necessarily equal with white counterparts, but like Hispanic groups and African Americans, you see that their colonoscopy rates are now the same, and I think that's a very recent trend. But Russian-speaking community members are not leveling off right there, and so the state and the city were really like, we need to do more right here, right now, and so that's where they brought CDN, and that's where we started with the project. Mm-hmm.
This is kind of a question for all of you guys. In terms of obviously the range of projects that you've presented is huge, and the range of issues to do with social justice is totally immense and overwhelming. And I'm just curious how you sort of go from being like, I have this interest in, for example, science and social justice, to being able to narrow it down to something so specific and like have a part in that? How does that process work, and what are the like stresses along the way of feeling like you're moving towards something meaningful for you as well as other people?
Do you want to?
Yeah. I mean, you don't. I mean, you fall into something, and then when you process it and you kind of start to connect the dots, then you realize, and hopefully you can kind of guide yourself, or if you have a great mentor like Katayun, who really urged me to stay with the time and effort study during those 3 months, then you start to see meaning, and you start to see where justice happens, and you think critically. And like I said, with the epidemiology class and the international health class, those still kind of keep informing you on what your interests are, where you want to spend your intellectual energy. So I think it's a combination of all of that. But like in retrospect, I have this like nice PowerPoint that connects all of the dots for you. But a lot of that has to do with you thinking about what you want and then kind of navigating that. And hopefully always be open to advice. I'm always kind of looking for advice from people, looking for mentors. So being open to that as well.
My answer is really going to echo Stephen's. Steve and I did this kind of independently, where we didn't see each other's students while we were doing these experiences, and they felt isolated at times. And when I first was thinking about like, what am I going to say that I did at CDN, I don't know. But then I was like, wait a second, take a step back and realize, like, connect the dots for yourself and think about all the things that you did and how to put it kind of linearly. And I think one of the challenges is when you're immersed in it, it's hard to see those. When I was mailing 400 Russian-speaking providers, I was not making any connections. I was like, I want to go home, I want to work on my thesis, but I'm doing this. And it wasn't until afterwards, or at the conference, I think I made like lots of connections that you need some time, because, and maybe you all didn't need time because you had each other to bounce ideas off of and to think through things and all of that, but it took me a little while to really process everything. Yeah.
One of the things that the fellows talked about with Catherine and Judy in our weekly seminar was defining what a community of practice is. And I think one of the ways that we were able to deal with what you're talking about was having a sort of culture around caring about the world. And it sounds cheesy and like so super broad, but there really was a solace in being able to interact with people and have our everyday conversations revolve around that sort of end goal of, we want transformation in our society, and whatever that meant, however that manifested in the conversation we were having, whether it was like, I wonder where these chips and salsa came from, like, oh my God, food justice, or like, let's go out and party, wait, should we party? Like, is that like bad for social justice? Like, what should we wear? Where do we buy our overwhelming, but it really was a sort of cultural support network of caring. So it sort of liberated at least me to feel like whatever space I was in, whether it was in the seminar or at home with my fellows or at work, that transformation was happening.
Yeah, I just want to echo the language of transformation. I think you can't go into it understanding that there will be an end, or understanding that you'll end in a concrete point where there's been learning and now you're on to your next. It's very much, I have these experiences and I've worked with Harlem Grown, and I'm still making sense of that to this very day. I mean, I spent probably 20 hours on this PowerPoint just jotting out what I thought was important to say, and I think in social justice, there's never an end, and you're always evolving, you're always learning new things, and the world is ever changing, so you have to kind of be able to understand and be able to immerse yourself in that community of practice and that support, and just be okay with that discomfort, be okay with working and living and playing in areas and territory that seem uncomfortable, and be okay knowing that your thinking and your heart is in the right place.
And just as one last point, I think that a lot of the times when we go into social justice, we have to kind of realize what it is that what is driving us to do whatever it is that we're doing. And something that I learned this summer was the sort of what drives my desire for change. And a lot of the times I thought it was anger at how the system is working, anger at how there is such immense oppression and how we are creating these conditions that allow people to suffer in various ways. And then I took a step back and I realized, no, anger is not sustainable. Anger is not gonna let me live a happy life because I'm gonna keep being angry at my community. I'm gonna be keep having sort of a like an enemy, and that's not sustainable in social justice. And sort of and I think that it might speak true for the other fellows as well, the approach of love for the community. And yes, it sounds cheesy, but it's true, because when thinking about social justice, we have to think about it in a way of what is it that we want for our community. We want to better our community because we love our community and because we want to make it better. It's not because we're angry at something, it's because we love something. And so I think that's definitely the approach into social justice that really makes that once you realize kind of what you love and the things that you love within your community, you get to decide what it is that you want to work towards or for. So.
Great question. Yeah, Rashid. Last question, Rashid.
This is actually less of a question and more of a comment. I just graduated from the new school in May with an MFA, and I studied public health in undergrad. And I just kind of wanted to share something that I shared with Judy earlier, that it's really inspirational for me to hear all of you saying things that I learned in grad school. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. And I really kind of just wanted to highlight what you were just talking about. Something that I kind of wanted to distill from what all of you have said is the importance of being a reflective practitioner, and thinking about the intentionality behind your practice and the work that you do. And when it does seem kind of like the work that you're doing is disparate and disconnected from the real world, if you're looking at big data and these really complex systems, that ultimately it does boil down to human impact and the way that people experience the work that you're doing. So thank you all so much for the hard work you put in.
Again, thank you so much for being here. We're very proud of our students, and we're very thankful for all of you spending tonight with us. Continue to mingle, leave as you need to leave. Again, thank you, and have a good night.